Hey everyone, talking to people who have broken free from the ME/CFS prison fills my heart and my soul. And with my guest today, the real magic you will see is in witnessing those breakthrough moments when everything clicks, symptoms start losing their grip, and what once felt impossible starts to feel within reach again. If you're new here, I'm Raelan Agle, and in this interview, we're breaking down exactly what the CFS recovery program looks like, how it works, what a typical recovery journey is like, and some of the key insights that can make all the difference. When recovery feels like a mystery with way too many plot twists, having a clear roadmap can change everything. I'm so excited right now to welcome Adrianne Sist joining us in Charleston, South Carolina. Not only will she share the biggest things that impacted her own recovery journey, but she'll also reveal some of the most powerful turning points that she sees every day as she helps others navigate this path. You are going to love Adrianne. She is one of the gentlest, most radiant, and most resilient people out there. Think Yoda, but with fewer riddles and way better hair. So let's dive in. Adrianne, so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for doing this.
Raylan, thank you so much for having me. Of course, I'm so grateful to be here.
Uh, so, quite the journey you've been on. Take us back. I don't know where you want to start, but how did this start for you?
Yeah. So it's there's a day, you don't really ever forget the day that your world seems to go upside down. So this all happened to me when I had my first crash in January of 2021. It was the end of January. And this was in the height of COVID. So, a lot of emotions were going on at that point, but it's pretty healthy up until this point. So overnight, this didn't feel like a slow burn for me. It was actually overnight. I woke up with an extremely high fever. I had cold sweats. I had a really high heart rate, and I didn't really get sick leading up until this point. Like, I'd have like colds here and there, but this was definitely like extreme. So like my first thought was I got COVID. All my friends got it already, my family, and they were telling me about it. So this is definitely COVID. So I took off work that day, and I just did not feel good. I just like lounged around on the couch and everything. And that night I was trying to go to sleep. And every time I tried to doze off, Raylan, like I would jerk awake and I would gasp for air. Like I couldn't breathe. And it felt like every time I tried to go unconscious, like my breathing would not kick in like automatically. It was a really weird feeling. And I remember I heard everything about COVID being in your lungs and affecting your breathing. So I started to freak out. And I told my husband, I was like, we need to go to the hospital. Like, I feel like I'm going to like die in my sleep or something. I was really scared. So we went to the hospital, and they did all the tests. Like, they even did like a scan on my lungs. Like, I went through this thing, and they took all this blood work, and I was there all night. And they sent me home saying everything looks okay. Some of the markers, like your white blood cell count's a little high, but other than that, like, you must be fighting like a virus. But they couldn't detect really what it was. I was like, okay. They gave me an inhaler. They gave me just like kind of the regular stuff, and I took it, and I just kept getting worse. So I had to take off another week of work, which led to 2 weeks of work. And I usually bounce back pretty quickly from being sick. So I'm like, this is undetected COVID. Like, they did not do something right. And I was taking tests every single day, and nothing was showing up. And by this point, like 2 weeks in, I burned through all my vacation at work. I burned through all my sick time at work. And again, I never take time off. So this was kind of stressing me out in the background. Like, when am I going to get better? I started developing more symptoms. And again, like, the first symptoms were the flu-like symptoms. Those were still there. But the sleep problem, like, I wasn't sleeping at all. Like, I could not fall asleep. I was gasping for air at night. Every time I stood up, Raylan, like, my heart rate would go to like 180 beats per minute. And I know this because I wore a Garmin watch. And I was freezing all the time, but then I get really hot. So like my temperature was really off. So symptoms were getting really crazy, like weird symptoms I've never felt before. I would have burning sensations on my body. So during this time, I started making appointments. I didn't even have a physician here in the US. Like that's how much I got sick. Like I didn't even have a doctor. So I was searching for doctors and I went in and I said, I think I have COVID. It's undetected. Like I got all these symptoms and I had like a list of symptoms on my phone and I read them out to them and they're like, interesting. Okay, well, we're going to do all the blood work. I mean, God, they took so much blood. And they checked everything else, like my heart rate and everything. And they dismissed me. And what they had on my records was generalized anxiety, post viral syndrome. And then Raelan, it just snowballed from there because I wasn't getting the answers and I was getting worse. So I decided to talk to specialists where I went to a cardiologist because my heart rate, was all wonky. I went to a neurologist. They did scans on my brain and everything because I had a lot of weird neurological symptoms as well. So yeah, you kind of get the picture. I mean, I probably saw, because I live in Charleston, South Carolina, on the East Coast. I went to like top doctors. We have a really good hospital here at Medical University of South Carolina. And they did every test under the sun. And I walked away with labels of post-viral, CFS, dysautonomia, POTS, generalized anxiety disorder, somatic symptom disorder, severe depression. So I had a lot of symptoms, but no solutions.
So, what did it feel like? I'm curious because I had a similar experience getting a laundry list of diagnoses. So, what did that feel like for you to hear all of those things, those labels now attached to you?
I honestly I couldn't believe it because I went from not again having a doctor and then having all of these diagnoses and labels on my chart, my medical chart, and then on top of it, just doctors telling me they didn't know how to help me. I felt really helpless. I was extremely scared. I felt like I was alone because I was taught and I grew up. If you don't feel good, go to the doctor, right? And of course, I mean, I was grateful enough where I didn't have to go as much during my life because I stayed pretty healthy. But that was the doctors in my eyes were, they're there to help me. They're there to figure it out. They're there to make me feel better. And that didn't happen. So I didn't know who to turn to. If the doctors couldn't help me, then who could? So yeah, Raylan, it's very scary feeling.
It's something that I know so many of us go through those stages. I'm sure there's a lot of people watching or listening that are nodding their heads. So I remember I got all the tests done and I went to my doctor. I used up all my sick time, all my vacation time. And then I went back to that doctor and said, I need like a short-term leave from work or something until I figure this out. I don't know what to do. And she just looked at me and said, very bewildered, like, how am I supposed to sign paperwork for that? There's nothing wrong with you. So
Yes.
then you go from that one place. I'm like, what do you mean? I can barely get out of bed. Like, it's just in this person who was going to be my savior in this, because that's how I grew up thinking,
Mhm.
was washing their hands of me and saying I was fine. But then I moved on to, an integrative medicine doctor. And through this, I had chronic Lyme disease, I had adrenal fatigue, I had Epstein-Barr, I had hormonal
Yeah.
imbalances, I had chronic fatigue syndrome, I can't even remember.
Yeah.
So in one way, it was overwhelming because none of those things seem to have a solution. But in another way, I also felt like, well, at least I have something. So when I'm off work, I can be like, well, I have these 19 things. And people be like, whoa, okay, that's
Yeah.
legit. So I kind of almost grasp onto them, which is not healthy either. Like I have 9 things broken in my body right now that I somehow have to figure out how to fix.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you just reminded me, I did the same thing. So I went like conventional doctor route, but then I also switched gears to a naturopath as well. And I was diagnosed with Lyme disease as well. They did all the tests. I can't tell you how much money, and and people watching this, the money spent on that. And again, I walked away with no answers. And just like you said, Raelan, it's like I had this whole list that was consuming me because I was like, okay, this is my mission. If nobody can help me, I have to figure something out. So it was all consuming. And that was another thing. It's like I needed to go back to work, and I tried, and maybe we could talk about this a little bit later, but like I tried to get back into work and I could not focus. Of course I was symptomatic, but all I wanted to do was find answers. All I wanted to do was search for answers so I could feel better. So it was definitely all consuming, which we know it makes it worse because we put that magnifying glass on it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I find too, when you have all these different things that you're told are wrong with you, then I'm like, okay, I need to fix the leaky gut syndrome. I need to fix the adrenal fatigue. I need to fix the Lyme disease. And I know it's interesting because I hear a difference in the laundry list of diagnoses people were given 10 years ago, 20 years ago versus now. It's a bit more POTS and fibromyalgia, but whatever it is, you end up with 100 things a day you think you're supposed to do, or 100 different supplements to address all these different things. And you're in this permanent state of panic, must fix myself, overwhelm. And it's just,
Overwhelmed.
it's
That's a really good
insane.
word, overwhelmed. Because I was
Yeah.
like, okay, all these symptoms must have all different solutions because I didn't know at the time that they were
Yeah.
coming from one place, a hypersensitive nervous system. But yeah, the overwhelming feeling of like I need to go to all these different specialists and it all needs to be
Yeah.
different ways to approach this. And I just felt like it was a huge mountain to climb, but I didn't even know where to start. I didn't even know what direction. So actually, yes, extremely overwhelming.
So
Mhm.
where did you start? What did you do with all those diagnoses?
So, this is one of the things that I learned that wasn't the best because there's good things that can come out of this and not so good things, but through Google, like through online. Like I learned so much more information that was serving me online, but as much as that, I mean, I was learning things that didn't serve me as well, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I took it into my own hands, and this is when I was about 11 months in, Raylan, and like before that, like it got even worse. Like I had to check myself into a mental health facility for 2 weeks because I was going weeks without sleep, where I was not in a really good frame of mind. So I checked myself into there. And then I had like week stays in the hospital while they were running tests on me. It just got worse. And again, discharged. So I didn't have any other choice but to look for external solutions. I was like, I got to do something different. And at that time, my sleep was one of the number one symptoms in my POTS, and dysautonomia is what the doctor said that I was dealing with. So I typed it into YouTube, and Miguel, CFS Recovery, his videos popped up. And this was back in 2021. So he didn't have many at that point. There were new videos, new content that he just started to roll out. And I remember laying on the couch because I could barely sit up, laying on the couch and just watching all of his videos back to back to back. And he was the first one to really sound like he understood what I was going through, but not just that, he was recovered. So I was just obsessed with watching these videos. And timing was on my side because the week I found him and started watching all these videos, I would watch them repeatedly, Raylan. And he put out a video that said he's going to be launching a program. And I'm like, what? I got to talk to this guy. Like, he's about to launch this program because he's going to tell us how he recovered. This is crazy. So I reached out to him. I was like, I'd love to be part of the program. I need help. Nobody can help me. And we set up a call together, and I was in his first cohort ever in his program. And that's when things started to turn around.
Ah, so amazing. What I would have given to have something like someone in front of me who's like, I've recovered and
Yeah.
I'm here to help. Be like,
It
what?
felt I remember I was crying. I felt
Oh,
like it was falling in my lap and I could not ignore it. So yeah, it was an amazing feeling that of hope for the first time.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's Powerful. It's just because it takes so much to keep picking yourself back up day after day after day when it feels so hopeless. And that hope, I think, is the fuel that without it, like, how, alone in the world trying to figure this out without that hope, it's really hard. So okay, so did you start his program right away? What did that look like? What happened from there?
Yeah, so we had to qualify, and the overthinker that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to qualify. I have so his program, his
Not funny, but relatable. That's why I'm laughing. Because that made me too.
this is another roadblock. Like,
What if I'm not a good patient? What if I'm the wrong kind of sick? What if he doesn't like it?
Yes, like, and like I was excited to talk to him, but I was really anxious because I was like, all of his content was CFS, like chronic fatigue syndrome, and that label was thrown at me many times. It was on my medical records, but I more resonated with POTS. Like that was my main focus was POTS and dysautonomia. Yes, I had fatigue, but POTS was really bad, and then the insomnia. So I remember when I was watching his videos, I'm like, oh, he's talking a lot about CFS, but I'm dealing with these things, but it sounds so similar. Like, can he help me with this, even though it's not mainly CFS that I'm dealing with? And that's where I was very anxious. I'm like, he's probably going to deny me because I don't have only CFS. And I had a call with him. We hopped on an application call together. And he said, no, Adrianne, I had POTS. I had all these symptoms that you're talking about. I can help you. Like this program is a really good fit. And something that really stood out to me was instead of going back into like the past and everything that happened, he just asked, was the first one to say, Adrianne, when you get your life back, what do you want to be doing? Like in 6 months from now, what do you want to be doing? And I just remember it like makes me emotional because I'm like, nobody ever talk to me like that of like me being in that recovered state and the things nobody asked me that what kind of things would I like to do when not if when I'm recovered. And I'm like, the first thing I want to do is I want to go for a run. I want to go to the gym. I loved working out. It was something that was a big part of my life, and of course that stopped because I could barely stand up. So that was my big North Star. And of course I remember saying, like, I want to be able to travel and be in the sun because I was having temperature regulation issues. And I was able to just visualize and paint that picture with them. And I will never forget, he said, okay, we're going to get you there. We're going to get you there in 6 months. There's no doubt about it. And I was just bawling. I'm like, what? You really believe in me? You're the first one that's told me this. And the hope, I could feel, Raelan, it's wild. I understand why, but I could feel like just my symptoms easing in that moment because I felt safe, I felt heard, and I had that hope. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna review everything. I think you're the right fit, which I think you are. I'll get back to you. And he did. And he's like, welcome to our cohort. We'd love to have you. And I was in a group with 8 other people, amazing people from all around the world. And this was the first time I really communicated with others in a solution focused setting. I was so used to being in the Facebook groups and like the Reddit groups, and it was not a good place to be half the time. And it really scared me. So this environment and the people that I was with, it was just an incredible experience. And a long story short, so I took his course. And at that time, he was the only coach, right? He was the one that was messaging us and he was leading the group calls and everything. I was like starstruck. I'm like, this guy, like he went through all this and he's recovered. Like, my God, I'm talking to him right now. I watched all his videos. And we went through a 6-week program. We did homework, we had modules, and I had so many mind shifts in these 6 weeks. Raelan. I mean, more than, this almost whole year of going to the doctors. And within 4 months of starting that program, I was back to work full time. I was working out again. And that's really when things started to take off. So, yes.
And that was a while ago. And I know, as you know, I know Miguel pretty well. I mean, him and I had him on his channel years, or on my channel years ago when he was just starting out, just to share his recovery story, and
Yeah.
have since had him back many times and had a great live session with him that I can link up for here to people to check out. He shares great practical information.
Yeah.
And you know, so many things that I love about Miguel and his program. And I speak so confidently and supportively of him because I know he's having such an incredible impact. Someone from my team that works with me here has taken his program and
Yeah.
has seen it firsthand. And I know he really works to improve it and iterate over time. So even in the time since you've taken it, I know he's, is adapting and learning and changing. And how do we address these outliers? And so yeah, it's just, I can't express how happy it makes me that there are programs like this out there
Yeah.
for the so many people in the world that are struggling. Because so many people I know, it's not going to be a one size fits all program for everyone. That being said, he's had a lot of success, and so many people that felt like they were stuck.
And I mean, just like you, I have so much respect for what you do too. It's amazing how we can turn something, it was the worst part of our lives, into helping
Yeah.
other people. And I could see that. I see that with you, of course, and I saw that with Miguel. But I was amazed, Raelan, on what he was teaching us. And you are so right. Because, we'll probably talk about this, but I'm now a coach in the program, but it has changed so much, of course, in a good way. But when I took that first course with him, he was still on the money. Like it was, I mean, I recovered, right? I
Yeah.
didn't need all the bells and the whistles. I didn't need all of this information, but
Yeah.
it has grown so much where now we can reach so many other people. And yeah, you're right. It's just incredible.
So, what were the key components? What are the things that you learned? What strategies did you use that helped you to have such rapid progress and start
Ye-
feeling better?
Yeah. So we call them mind shifts in recovery, in CFS recovery. So I had a few big mind shifts. And the first one was about how you're responding to symptoms. For those of you who are watching here, you've probably heard others talk about this, but it really is the main thing that really started to get momentum going in my recovery. I remember the first week we were learning about the nervous system, because understanding the nervous system is very important. You can't recover without understanding. And there's a fine line with that, because I got myself into trouble many times because I tried to understand too much. I tried to dig into the science of everything and the mechanisms and the mitochondria and all this stuff. And I was just hitting a wall. So, too much trying to understand can backfire, but it was
Yeah.
the perfect amount of understanding that what your nervous system is in charge of. And also, we have a golden rule of recovery, and it's called: your recovery is determined by how well you respond to symptoms. And immediately, Raelan, like when he showed that slide and I read that, I remember my mind was just like, I was just staring at it. And I'm like, whoa, like I need to take full ownership. I had to be honest with myself. And I remember saying to myself, I have been responding so poorly to this whole situation, but I mean, could you blame me? Right? We're human. We were going through something challenging and I wasn't educated on what's going on. So, of course, I'm going to freak out. But yeah, I have not been responding well. I've been freaking out. I've been constantly running to the emergency room. I can't tell you how many times. I dialed 911 every time I didn't feel well. I was Googling my symptoms every second I got. So, responding well to symptoms was the first thing I started to implement.
And what does it mean to respond well to symptoms?
Yeah. So this is a good question, because it can mean different things depending on your symptom, because symptoms, like I had physical symptoms, of course, like my high heart rate and burning sensations. Like I had physical somatic real symptoms, but I was highly emotional. I had mental symptoms as well that were out of character for me too. So I categorize those as symptoms. So when I would get a physical symptom, my high heart rate, instead, the old me, I would freak out. I would say, oh my gosh, like what's going on with me? I feel like I'm having a heart attack. I need to call 911. And that would just make it worse. So when I had this mind shift, responding well to symptoms, that now is going to look like, and this is what we were taught, saying when we feel it, okay, acknowledging it. It's my nervous system. It's not anything sinister. It's not anything threatening. It's not trying to harm me. So it's just my nervous system. I'm safe. Now I need to respect it by staying as calm and as neutral as possible. And that could look like distracting myself when I'm feeling that symptom, looking at other evidence of recovery, watching recovery videos that Miguel has, redirecting my response. So that's for like when I was feeling physical symptoms. And the same goes for, I would get really emotional symptoms. Like I would get extremely scared, fearful, or extremely sad, or extremely frustrated in the moment. And I would like dwell in that emotion. I just get really in it, and I start to spiral, and I get very black and white and polarized with it, like I'm never going to get better, why me? And I just be in this really negative spot. That wasn't responding well. So even I had to work on that with my emotions, where when I felt that emotion, I had to say, it's just a symptom. It's just my nervous system. I need to let it flow through me. I need to allow myself to feel it without resistance, without judgment, and trust that this will pass. And again, redirecting my thoughts to something else or my attention. So that's what responding well looked like for me, Raylan. And that was the first thing that kind of got a wedge into my hypersensitive nervous system, where I actually started to feel the difference. I started to feel in real time when I felt that symptom, when I tried to stay calm, I could feel it. I could feel it start to settle and feel more safe. So that was definitely the first thing I implemented.
I love that you brought up the emotions because it's only something we've recently started talking more about on this channel, because I used to think of emotions as a byproduct of the experience. Of course, I'm anxious. Of course, I'm fearful. Of course, I'm depressed. Look at what I'm going through. So those feelings are inevitable until I'm better. So
Yes.
they're just there. And then I read this book called Unlearn Your Anxiety and Depression by Dr. Howard Schubiner, who many
Heard
probably
of
are
him.
aware is,
Mhm.
a leader in this field of mind-body medicine and brain retraining and nervous system regulation. And he talks about, just like with acute versus chronic symptoms. So in conditions like CFS and long COVID, we're looking at chronic symptoms, with which are almost always learned neural pathways in the brain that can be retrained. It's the same thing with anxiety and depression and even insomnia, things like this. It's just another tool that your body uses. And in the moment, it made sense. But once they become chronic, they're now learned pathways in the brain that can be treated just like any other symptom. And I love, because he has a lot of the conventional approaches of giving yourself messages of, I am safe, I am fine. But he also has a sort of no nonsense approach. He's like, you can just interrupt it and kind of put your foot down and be like, when you feel the anxiety, if you're like, nope, we're
Yeah.
not doing that anymore. Nope, nope. I love that.
Yeah, I love that. That was exactly what I did
Yeah.
too. I would say my personality more leans towards that. And I think sometimes it got me into trouble because I'm not as much because I learned this didn't really serve me, but I was very stubborn. So like when I would get the symptom, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I don't have time for this. I'm safe. Leave me alone. It'd come from a more of like annoying place, a resisting place. And I noticed sometimes that did help me, it was a way, it was one of the tools I use. But then other times I would do that and the symptom would knock at me a little harder. Like it'd come at me a little harder. And I remember I'm like, why? Well, it's not listening to what I'm saying. It's not saying like, I got this, leave me alone, nervous system, but it was listening to the emotion behind it. And the emotion I had behind it was still frustration, and still anger. So I remember this kind of leads me to the next thing I wanted to bring up. When Miguel says that golden rule in recovery is how well you respond to symptoms, well, okay, we're not going to freak out with them anymore, right? I'm not going to be fearful of them anymore. But guess what? I was still frustrated with them. I really didn't want to deal with them anymore. So when we're sending that, I learned that this was the next kind of hump I had to get over, because the frustration was still sending that signal of not being safe to my nervous system. And I didn't know that because I got to a certain point where I felt a little bit better with not freaking out, not running to the emergency room. But then I started to get frustrated with the whole situation and frustrated with the symptoms. And that really I wasn't getting anywhere. I felt like I started to plateau. And that's where I really had to look at Raelan. I had to say, okay, not get frustrated about the situation. I need to start to talk to my nervous system like it's my friend, give it a little bit more love, talk to it more in a neutral way of like, hey, I hear you. Thank you so much for trying to protect me. I know what you're trying to do, but you don't need to do that. And it's coming from a more like a kinder place. And when I really figured that out, things really started to take off, because I look back and I'm like, I didn't only react like this to symptoms. Like I reacted like this to things that were on in my life. I remember I get frustrated really easy when things would happen, like experiences that I wouldn't prefer or things that I didn't expect. Get frustrated. I get agitated. So this was a very learned behavior, but I was doing it to my symptoms, and it was a very overlooked personality trait that was keeping me stuck. So I wanted to bring that up too. And I see this a lot as a coach now, Raylan. I see a lot of individuals are like, hey, I'm implementing the golden rule of recovery. I'm responding as well as I can. I don't fear the symptoms anymore. And I believe them. Like they're really telling the truth. But then those symptoms are still knocking on their door because they're now frustrated. And every time I say, hey, are you frustrated with them? You might not fear them. But they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, the nervous system sees frustration as fear as well. So any negative emotion, it's seeing it as fear. So that's something that if you're listening to right now, maybe start implementing if you're dealing with that.
I love too how you said you noticed it in other areas of your life, because I continue to say now that my life in the 5 years since I recovered is just CFS recovery on repeat, just figuring out how it applies to everything else in my life. Like, oh my goodness, how I approach my relationships, my schedule, my work, my frustration, my emotions, my hobbies, my holidays. Like, it's just all those tools, all those mindset, all those things continue to apply, because recovery for most of us, we say, is a process of internal transformation, really. So
Yes.
it's a blessing that it actually helps you with so many other things once you move past these symptoms. Like,
It
oh wow,
really
these
is.
patterns play out everywhere.
Yeah. And I remember having this thought because I was a risk taker in my life. Like I was an extreme athlete when it came to doing new things and just doing scary things, like labeled scary things. Like I was all
Yeah.
for it. Like I didn't have that kind of fear. So when this happened, I was very surprised how much it rocked my world. But if I look back, just like you said, it wasn't usually the fear that was the issue. It was a frustration and agitation with life. And it resurfaced when these symptoms, because it wasn't in the beginning, of course, when we don't know what's going on. I was scared, like I'll admit, right? I was scared,
Yeah.
but that fell away pretty quickly once I understood what was going on. I felt a little bit more safe, but that frustration really took work because it was a trait that was there in my around like ever since I was young. So
Yeah, and that self-compassion piece that so many people bring up, because you can do the scary things, you can do the hard things, but what is the voice in your head telling you while you're doing them? I'm not good enough unless I do this. Go harder. No breaks for you. The other person is doing it better. I'm not safe unless I have, and worthy as a human if I ate PhDs and run an
right.
ultra marathon. Or if you run the marathon and you're like, this is going to keep me in shape year round because I enjoy running and it's a de-stressor and it's going to keep my level of fitness up, but I like feeling that my body is strong. Or is it like, I'm not worthy as a human unless I check that box.
Yeah, that intention that you just said of like, this is healthy, like that, never. Like that's now the way I live now. But you are saying something really important because I just had a mind shift right now. When I would be, because I was a high diver too, I was a gymnast. I wasn't, oh my God, I'm afraid to do this. It's like, if I don't do this, I'm not good enough. If I don't do this, I'm weak. If I don't do this, then I'm going to view myself, not in a good way. I got to push myself. I'm weak if I don't do this. And that was really coming from being a frustrated place. So, yeah, absolutely. Hmm.
So you've shared so much pure gold already. This is incredible. And I don't expect you to teach everyone in the next few minutes Miguel's entire program. It wouldn't be fair to him either. But is there anything else that stands out from the process that was really impactful for you that you'd want to highlight for people?
Yeah. So I'm really big on now that now, I'm 4 years from really getting this and 3 years fully recovered now. And something that I really noticed during recovery, during my journey, was how much before Raelan that I didn't trust my body. It sounds crazy because, I was just saying, like, as an athlete, I was a high diver, I did gymnastics, I did all these crazy, risky things with my physical body. But when it came to my like body's overall health, I thought that I always needed to be in control of that. So that's showing that I really didn't feel safe and I really didn't trust what my body was capable and that or capable of. And that control, it was in the form for me of like eating healthy and working out. And then when I felt sick, I would go to the doctor because I thought that any sickness meant I had no control, right? So I had to reach for an external a source to solve the problem. So I really didn't know how powerful our bodies really are. And this really came to light when I did get sick. And this kind of leads me into another little mind shift. They go together. I had such bad health anxiety, Raylan. I didn't know it was as bad until like this really came to the surface when I was going through recovery journey. Um, again, if someone was to ask me, wow, you have a lot of trust in your body. You have a strong mind muscle connection. I'd say, yeah, I do. But when it came to getting sick or feeling out of control, I remember I had so much health anxiety where I would be scared. This goes back to kind of what I said at the beginning. I didn't have an established doctor. I was scared to go to the doctor. I was scared that they were going to tell me something was really, really wrong with me. And that all it comes down to the core issue of like not trusting my own body. This other mind shift of me having health anxiety, like I remember years going back, when I would go to the doctor, my like blood pressure would be really high, my heart rate would be really high, and they said I had like white coat syndrome, and I'm like, what is that? And they said I was like just very anxious going to the doctors. But it was because I feared being sick, and I think that fear came from, again, not trusting my body, but number two, fear of what being sick would get in the way of, right? Because I was a very active individual. So it's like, oh my gosh, I can't go to the doctor and get this diagnosis or whatever because I got stuff to do, right? I'm go, go, go. So there was a lot of deep fear and not having trust in my own body. And I say this as a mind shift because going through this journey, the more trust that I had in my body's ability to heal and getting out of my way, like getting out of its own way, the quicker I started to recover. And the more I really started to embody what health was, because again, I was, I ate healthy, I worked out, but my mindset wasn't really healthy. I didn't have that healthy mindset because I didn't trust. So that trust in my body really, really sped up my recovery. And I'm still in awe today. And this goes back into just saying like it's the nervous system, right? That's like a big statement, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just the nervous system. But to truly believe it's the nervous system, which means the nervous system, it has my back. My body loves me so much. It's not trying to hurt me. It's trying to keep me safe, like to the ends of this earth. And I really had to trust that for this to work, because if I had conflicting messages in my brain where I'm like, mm, I don't know if I believe that. I need to go get this supplement. I don't know if I believe that. I need to go get this doctor. I need to go do something that's external. That's going to send conflicting messages to my nervous system. So I really had to work on that and really trust. And I do. Now I fully embody that. But since I have, my world has definitely opened up.
I think too, I love all of that. Coming through this, I imagine all of us had some sort of, or many of us, fear and anxiety around health. And I think most of us were brought up to think that most health conditions struck out of the blue, like getting struck by lightning. You had no choice. You were just going to wake up one day with a terminal illness. And of course, there are some people with very specific genetics, and certain
Yeah.
things do come on suddenly, but the vast majority of the time, that's not the case. And
Yeah.
we have so much more control over our health than most of us were brought up to believe. So it's a really amazing feeling now to come out and feel safe in your body and think, okay, I got past this thing. I understand how my body works now so much better. All this education that I should have had before, I have now. And also, I recovered from something that the medical professional told me that virtually no one recovers from.
Yeah.
So, even hearing that message from your doctor doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. So, yeah, I think most of us come out the other end just in a much better place
Yeah.
in trusting our body.
Yeah, and it definitely makes you question a lot of things too, right? Because I had to work through, I fully recovered, but then I noticed I had resentments. I had resentments towards doctors. I had resentments towards my mom and my parents and my brother and the people around me that were telling me that I needed to go to the doctor and I needed to take this medication, and not having that belief that the body of what the body is capable of. I wasn't taught that, and I just remember being so bitter. I had a lot of resentment, and I've had to work through that and really look at it as from a gratitude point of view of like, you know what, if I didn't go through this, I wouldn't even be living this better life, right? I wouldn't know the difference. There'd be no contrast. So I've definitely had to work through that. But it just feels like a blessing to know this. And sometimes I look at this, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this a blessing, or is it a curse? Because now I know I have so much power. I know what I'm capable of. The nervous system is incredible. Our bodies are incredible. And knowing that sometimes can feel like it comes with a lot of responsibility. But I've had to really change my perspective on that to look at it as from an empowering point of view. And I'm no longer playing the game of defense anymore. I'm on the offense. I'm willing to write my own story now that I am in the driver's seat. So yeah, the
Yeah.
trust in that and understanding is amazing.
And a really good point that you got to a place of gratitude, it sounds like, which so many people I interview do. And I say this myself, but a really good call out that it's a process to get there. You need to feel all the other feelings first. You need to feel the anger and the resentment and the grief and all of those things
Yeah.
before you can arrive to that place of like, okay, I've processed it all. It was shit for a
Yeah.
thousand reasons. Like, it was horrible. But having gone through it all, I can see that where I am now is a better place. And I can have some gratitude for the massive silver linings of this really terrible process.
That's right,
Yeah.
Raelan. And I'm glad
Yeah.
you brought up that point. Because if I was, I mean, I'll just be honest with you. If I was to hear, oh, you just need to be grateful, like, and I'm dealing with something like this, I'd be like, screw you. Like,
Yeah.
like what?
Yeah.
What are you telling me to do? Just think positively and be grateful. You don't understand anything that I'm going through. So I would get defensive. And I think I have. I remember being in some forums where individuals would say that, and I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. So I'm glad you bring that up. It took time. It took going through those emotions and going through the journey to start connecting the dots and seeing it bigger picture. And that was part of the healing process,
Yeah.
because I don't think I'd be, I know it's not, I don't think I know I wouldn't be where I am today, if I didn't work through those things. Because if I was to carry around those resentments towards not just doctors, but other things that have happened in my life or trauma, my nervous system would still be in a resisting state, right? It'd still feel dysregulated. So I had to work through those things. And gratitude was definitely something I leaned on. But again, it's easier to be grateful when things are going well, right? It's hard. It's really hard to be grateful
Mhm.
when things are not. And that's what I learned too. If I could just get 1% better on the days that are really challenging me and I really don't feel grateful, if I
Yeah.
could really intentionally look for it, it made a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also okay to have those days where, like, this is hard. I'm struggling. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sad. I'm scared. And that's okay.
Yes.
It's all the emotions. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this whole journey is that all of our emotions just want to be felt.
They do. They don't want to
Yeah.
be swept under the rug. They don't
No.
want to be dwelled on, right? They just want to be
No.
felt in that
Same.
gray area.
Release. Yeah, and
Right.
release. So many great things here. If there was another, or is there another, a key thing, a part of this process that you'd really want to highlight for people that are watching?
Yeah, I do. Again, this might sound basic. You guys might already, be practicing this if you're listening, but this was a huge thing that I did, that really moved the needle towards my recovery. And that was tracking things. If you're someone who's like, I don't track, then maybe this isn't for you. But if you are somebody who wears a health watch or you're tracking your blood pressure, unless your doctor has advised you to do that, I suggest that's the first thing you need to start changing. I was an avid health tracker. I had my Garmin watch that would track my sleep, my heart rate variability, my stress levels, my steps and whatnot. I mean, so on and so forth. And I had these habits before I got sick. It just wasn't when I got sick, but it definitely amplified, right? I took pride in my sleep. I took pride in my heart rate, my fitness ability. So when I had all these symptoms pop up and my stats were all wonky, it really scared me. And this really got me in a rabbit hole and it made a lot of things worse. So if there's one thing to take away, you know, not asking you to go cold turkey where you got to like throw off your watch and like never look at it again, but really try maybe to stop looking at it, maybe disable some of the features on a little bit and listen to your nervous system and see how you feel. Because when I first stopped taking off my watch and stopped taking my blood pressure, it felt very uncomfortable. I felt very out of control. And then I had to ask myself, okay, was this thing actually really helping me, or was it helping me feel more safe because I was trying to prevent doing too much activity, or I was trying to prevent, a heart attack or something? It was always, the intention was coming from a prevention place with my trackers. And if it's coming from that intention, it's doing no good. It's actually putting a magnifying glass on the situation and it's creating more dysregulation in the nervous system. So that's really something I learned now. I go for runs and I can wear my watch because I'm using it as a tool to help me. So it's not completely a negative thing, but if you are using it from a fearful intention, please remove that. Because it really shifted something in my nervous system and it helped my recovery tremendously.
Another version of this that might resonate for some people that either are older or less tapped into technology or became unwell years ago, like I did, because well meaning books were telling me to keep daily symptom journals. So I was tracking every day. How many hours of sleep did I get? Did I have this like just every day? And then I was supposed to be looking for patterns that I was getting better, which
Oh
are
my
impossible to see when you're tracking things every single day. And you're just so fixated on symptoms, which we now understand not helpful at all. So,
no.
whatever version of this, if you're watching or listening, resonates, there's so many different ways that we can fixate on what's happening in our body. And just to, yeah, I really invite you to take a look at what purpose is it serving? Is it the illusion of control? Is it creating more fear? Is it because somebody else told me I have to do this? So it's just sort of obedience to someone else's, plan for what they think is best for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've interviewed people who have found it helpful. So if you do these things and you're like, no, I see this and it helps me gauge my energy, then great. But just really have that critical thinking conversation with yourself to see, what is this serving? What am I getting from this? And what am I not?
Yeah.
Yes, amazing. All really well said. And if you're listening and watching, and if this information is resonating and you're thinking, yes, this is something I'd like to learn more about, I'll link another interview I did with Junior Kai. He's someone who went through a horrendous journey with ME/CFS, also used the same program for recovery and explains it really well and talks about some different aspects that Adrianne didn't talk about. So that will be a really one to check out. Thank you so much for being here and doing this today. I really shared so many great things, just so much gratitude. Thank you, Adrianne.
Thank you, Raylan, for having me. And just one more thing, you guys, if it's possible for me, it's possible for others too. Raylan's fully recovered, not just me and not just others that have been on this channel, but countless others. So if we're not unique and you're not unique, if we can do it, you can do it. So don't give up. And you just showing up and watching Raylan's channel, that means that you are looking to improve. So thank you so much, Raylan, for having me.
Yeah, we're not superhumans by any stretch of the imagination. We were regular, terrified people feeling really unwell and hopeless, just like so many others. So, yeah, that's massive takeaway from my over 200 interviews over the years is that no one is too far gone. No one is too old, too sick, too severe. Like, what about I have this specific thing or that specific thing? I feel like I've almost heard it all by now. So there's hope, absolutely hope for everyone. And if people are interested in learning more about Miguel or his program, I can link some of his past videos and the details to his program and YouTube channel and all that, because he's got a ton of great resources. So thank you again, Adrianne. Thank you to everyone who's watching and listening. And I hope to see you in this next video with Junior Kai.
Thank you for all you do, Raylan.